It's showtime.
Ask the Podcast Coach for May 6, 2017.
Let's get ready to podcast.
Oh, there it is. That fun-filled music. That means it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach. I'm your host, Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Mixlr, what to do when you change your podcast. And I'm going to talk about, it's an old problem that is rearing its ugly head in podcasting. And of course, we're looking to answer your podcast questions. Come on over to askthepodcastcoach.com/live. Or if you'd like to join on in, just go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join. And to help me answer those questions is the one and only from theaverageguy.tv, Jim Cullison. How's it going, buddy?
Greetings. Happy Saturday morning to you, Dave. Happy belated Star Wars Day. That's always a big day in the tech communities as everybody goes nuts on May the 4th. It's a lot of fun. I really kind of enjoy it. My family all did T-shirts this year, so it was fun to have that around.
Can I say something blasphemous?
Yeah, do it.
I actually watched, I think it was TNN or one of those stations, played all the movies.
Yeah, TBS, I think.
TBS
did it.
Mark Hamill is not the world's greatest actor. You know what I mean? There are times when I'm like going, wow, that's,
I know, it's scary. Right now, too. He's seen some of his live stuff, and you're like, really? I mean, Mark, what's going on, dude? So, yeah, it's... I
mean, he's, on the other hand, kudos for running with everything you got. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, I guess I'm going to be Luke Skywalker till the day. No, he's actually done a lot of stuff with voiceover and stuff. We could use that into a podcasting topic.
Well, isn't he he's the voice of the Joker, right?
Yeah.
He's
done a couple things with cartoons.
Yeah.
So when you can't get a gig someplace else, go, whatever.
Listen, when you're Luke Skywalker, you have it made for the rest of your life. I mean, can you imagine how that one role at that young of an age set him up for eternity? Yeah. I mean, he's Luke Skywalker, for God's sakes. So
he makes people cry. He was on he made an appearance on May 4th on Jimmy Kimmel, and they had a guest on that actually invited him to his second birthday. He actually wrote him. I don't know how you write a letter when you're 2, but he somehow invited him to his birthday. So, and this guy's just a huge Star Wars nerd.
Yeah.
And he came on, and the guy was literally just about peeing his pants.
I wonder how many Star Wars fan podcasts there are out there. There's got to be a ton, right? I haven't listened to. I've never listened to one.
I know there's one that I think they actually. It's like Star Wars minute by minute or something like that, and they literally listen to a minute of the movie and talk about it.
Wow!
And I'm like, really? Okay, so
that's the way to do it. I mean, it's certainly fan podcasts are a big deal. You live and die on the fandom. If in Daniel's case, I think he just said in chat that his Once Upon a Time ends forever this month, and once the show gets canceled, I mean, you can't really go too much longer. I imagine you could stretch it out.
Right.
Think of Firefly, right? That one season of Firefly, and it's gotten all this. It has all this these fandoms that exist around it. It was one season, and they made a movie at the end, and yet it still holds on. I still talk to my friends like, "Hey, have you seen Serenity?" Was the name of the movie. Have you seen Firefly? So, anyways, it's sometimes you get these really weird pockets, these niches that just don't go away.
Well, I guess you could always, if let's say you did a Friends show. Well, you could always follow Joey for a season until it died.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there might be a spinoff of some. I know the Big Bang Theory sounds like they're hanging it up eventually, and Sheldon's going to get his own show, or I don't know if it's going to be him, but it's a
that always works well. That always works well because we know how Joey spun off a show that didn't work.
There's only one that I can think of, and that was Frasier.
Yeah,
but I think that was the whole crew kind of came with him.
Yeah.
There have been other spinoffs. I mean, Mary Tyler Moore was a spinoff of, I don't know. Boy, I got to dust off a lot of cobwebs now.
You guys start really thinking, kind of like, does it? But there's some great, if you're into those genres, there's some great material in there, and they can go well beyond, the live shows. As you go back, I think of, the podcast about the Andy Griffith Show.
Yep. 2 chairs, no waiting.
Yeah. Nostalgia. And so there's some great opportunities in that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we're going to get nostalgic about is the days when Mixler was free. Remember that? We'll be doing that. How's that for a transition?
There you go.
Yes, thank you. Steve, to take a quick 10-second tangent back, Rhoda was a spinoff of Mary Tyler Moore. I knew there was some, and of course the Jeffersons were a spinoff
Right.
of All in the Family. So it does work, but most of the time it doesn't. But anyway, so Mixler has, thanks to Jason Bryan for letting us know this, is apparently not going to be free anymore, to which I actually, there was a part of me that was, a little like, all right, cool, because that means they're not going to go out of business. If somebody's losing the free plan, that means A, you probably have a service that people are using, but B, it's probably a bad thing, because if you have too many people using the free thing, we have found over time, Podango and a couple other free media hosts that just don't make it. And I know, Jim, you were checking out the pricing.
Yeah, you can still try it for free. So you've got that option if you want to go out there and do it. And we've used Mixler in our pre-show just 10 minutes before to kind of get things going. So if you like to broadcast live, or you want to broadcast link, I've gone to Spreaker for most of that, because they do a great job of hosting the file as well, and some other reasons. The integration with iHeartRadio back in the early days when that was working, it still is working, don't get me wrong, but it was free and all, some of those other things. But anyways, with Mixler, their premium, $10 or $99 a year, 3 hours per day, if you're broadcasting. So Dave, that's for most podcasters. They're gonna jump back on Mixler, stay on Mixler. That's going to be a plan that's probably going to work for them if they want to broadcast their 1 or 2 hour show, whatever. 3 hours a day is what you get you. And it gets you all the basics, right? Being able to broadcast live, do what we do, mobile chat, unlimited amount of listeners. You can schedule events. You get basic stats. And then it just goes up the chain, right? $20 will get you the premium. That adds some, you can disable the chat if you want to, and you can switch your audio quality in and out if you want to. And then the producer, which they say, it's really funny, they use the titles for casual use, that's the $10 plan. For devoted use, that's the $20 plan. And then for the pro, $500 a year or $50 a month. And that gets you all the bells and whistles, including, what's interesting is tune-in capability. So it looks like they've got some integration, or they've built some integration with TuneIn. And if you're following along, TuneIn has really made the jump to integrate in with all these assistants, all these audio assistants that we have out there. It works well with the Amazon device. TuneIn is a kind of has most favored nation status when it comes to streaming things. You can stream stuff through those Amazon devices as well. Works with Cortana on Windows 10. You can load the app on Windows and say, Cortana, play TuneIn, and play your podcast on TuneIn. It'll play it for you. So I think TuneIn's becoming a more and more important player in that. But yeah, no more free plan.
Yeah, I'm doing the $10 a month. I'm the casual user. And of course, we should probably mention this is a live thing. If you're not doing any kind of live broadcasting, then you don't need it. But yeah, and I remember when I started paying them, they actually emailed me and said, "Why are you paying us? We gave you a free account." I said, "Because I like your stuff." And I said, "I want you to stay in business." I said,
you wouldn't host it there? They're not hosting, are they?
I don't believe so.
It's just live for the most part. Are they storing them there? I'd have to go back and look and remember.
Yeah, I know it's there. I have because when I go in, I can add it to my show reel, and I think people can download, but they don't do any iTunes tagging or anything like that. So I don't think they're really meant to be a host. They did give me, I was amazed that like last week we had like 14 or 15 people that were listening.
Yeah, Daniel says they do save archives. And I remember that I had used, at one point in time, I was broadcasting live both on Spreaker and on Mixler at the same time. You can do that. And I just wasn't getting enough. And then, which chat room do you check? And, all those, right? You don't want somebody to put there's something in a chat room and then it just sits dead. So we eventually just dropped Mixler and stayed on Spreaker.
Well, it saved me when I remember one time I had not checked our levels, and it was just this ball of distortion. And I went over, luckily on Mixler, sometimes I don't, it's a little soft over on Mixler, and luckily it was perfect. It was just the right volume level. So I actually downloaded the file over there, and we were good over there. So
Daniel says something similar. He said he used the archive recently when he ejected this SD card without stopping the recording.
oops, yeah,
Yikes!
Been
But
there,
it's
done
good to have a backup. I mean, does it really hurt? I mean, does it really hurt you to broadcast live on Mixlr and have it as an audio backup? I've never thought of it that way. As you're saying it, we see this in the Facebook group all the time of like, hey, what's a good, I'm trying to use a service that's recording what I'm doing, and they keep failing when we think of, the Skype stuff or whatever. Well, just add that to your plan, run a live thing out to Mixlr. You don't have to even point anybody out there, but it would be an audio backup of your show being recorded if you got get all the vocal channels through it. So maybe not a bad backup.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to point out there's a service I might bring. It's not dead. I just haven't mentioned it. And I've been going through rebuilding a website of mine of all these resources for podcasters. At this point, it's at podcastingresources.com. And I got to the podcast promotion and I was like, oh, wow, I forgot I had this. And I logged in, and it was funny because half the podcasters that were using this, it's podcastclicks.com. I wouldn't go over and sign up right now because I'm really close to just pulling the plug on the whole thing because I'm not sure if it's relevant anymore. And so that's the question is, the idea of this thing was you would put a piece of code on your website, you would upload a banner. So whatever it is, you could have like I think I deleted the 468 by 60 or whatever the old banner size was. We'd have these banners, you would put a code on your, in your sidebar or wherever, and it would promote other shows. And for every banner that you showed on your site, your banner would be showed on somebody else's site. And then much like iTunes, you could have different categories. So you could just choose to show categories that you're in, or you could show them all. And I had one that was like explicit. So if somebody had, This Week in Sex, On Fire, whatever the show was, something that was a little more adult related, you had to put it in that category. And if I ever saw somebody like, I would approve all the banners. So if somebody had a big insert body part here, I was like, okay, that's not going on the network. And so what I did was I was like, maybe I should. Number one, I noticed that, I was really surprised there's no WordPress version of this. I thought I bet there's a better system for this now. And there really isn't. And the old system is very like Web 1990, but it does work. It's still working fine. It's never been hacked. But I noticed I was on version 4.0. They're on version 8.0 at this point. And I was like, maybe I should upgrade. I want to move it off onto a different server. And then I was like, before I do all this work, is this something that people would even be interested in? And so if you go to askthepodcastcoach.com/banner poll, you can say yes or no. The only thing, last time everybody was free. And I realized that not everybody wants to put banners on their website. There is the ability in this system, if I wanted to, where you could pay for banners. And that way you would get the promotion without putting banners on your website. And I thought, well, maybe I would turn that on this time. Jim, what are your thoughts on this idea? Because I'm on the fence.
Yeah, it's tough. I put a quick poll in the chat room to say, hey, are banner ads dead? I just can't, in the age of so much blocking going on in the browsers with banner ads, with ads in general. I don't know if they're effective anymore. And nothing annoys me more than when I go to a news site, because I'm trying to find, I've clicked off Facebook and I'm trying to, something interesting to me, and the page is just full of ads, right? I mean, it's just basically, I hit clickbait and I came in and, they've got some kind of provocative news headline, and the page is full of ads. So I think most people today are turned off by ads, especially when it's just obnoxious and over the top on your website. And then I just don't know how many podcasters are actually going to the website anymore to look to get anything.
That was my thought.
My traffic is down, not down a lot, but it's down more than it was last year at this time from people actually coming back. Yet my numbers have stayed the same or are growing a little bit. So I just don't know if we're in, and I don't know if on mobile, if it's that effective. If we are going to the website on mobile most of the time, and if I'm listening to a podcast and you say, oh, go check the show notes, and I'm going to go over to your site and do it. I'm going to do it on my mobile device. And of course, banner ads are not as effective on mobile devices as they were on the PC. So I don't know, Dave. I wouldn't think it would get much traction or have much success. Even in this banner exchange idea where
Right.
it's mine are free and I'm playing yours. I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that effective.
Because I was amazed that I'm still getting like hundreds of thousands of impressions of the people that are still on there, even
Really?
though, I was like, wow, people are still using this.
Is there any way of knowing of a click? Is there a click through rate?
Yeah.
In other words, and what kind
About
of percentage?
2.63.
Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
If you're getting hundreds of thousands of views and you're getting
Yeah.
2%,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I thought, well, if nothing else, it's free to me. I mean, aside from the hosting, I was like, it's kind of
Where's
what I
the
did.
banner? Where's the banner exchange that you're put on your site? Where have you loaded that to?
It's at the website's podcastclicks.com.
Okay.
And it's you can see the banners are like, I think I have 150 by 150, which is really small. And then I think I had 1240 by 180 or something like that. So they're little baby banners, and we would add something like 300 by 250. That's a fairly popular size, maybe a skyscraper. That it's one of those things where it's like, so I might move it and upgrade it and throw it out there. And then what I did was, I think I put, once there were X amount of people in a category, I would throw one school of podcasting banner. That was kind of, and it was well known that, hey, occasionally you're going to see a school of podcasting banner in here. So if you don't like it, quit not paying me, kind of thing. So, but it was, I just thought I'd throw it out there. I was like, I was going through, the other thing I thought was funny about this is I go through and looking at all these different resources, because what happened was, and this is again kind of the whole thing, the script I was using at podcasting-resources.com, the company went out of business. They just, half of them started another company, and then it got kind of flaky, and I went to email them, and they're like, yeah, we're not here anymore. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So as I'm now updating podcasting-resources.com, no dash in the middle, there are things like PodWallet. I remember that was one of those things like AdvertiseCast that will help you find you sponsors. No. Yeah. And the other thing, and I'm not sure why, a lot of things that go out of business, the Chinese buy those domains. I mean, it's all like click Chinese, click, oh, is this still here? Click Chinese. It's like, it was interesting that how many things had just gone out of business, or even like, I forget, there was one t-shirt company that used to make t-shirts that was kind of, that. And in some cases it was interesting to see places that had grown, but I was amazed at many things that just went down the tubes.
Well, those early, there's a lot of good ideas in the early 90s, early 2000 that just never made it, right? They were too early. This banner exchange idea, man, I can remember 97, 98. That was a big deal. Like we were all trying to do banner exchange, right?
I was dying last night because I'm Googling this. I'm like, well, if there's a better thing, if it looks better, and literally everything that came up was either A, join our banner exchange, and those websites were literally done in front page, I'm telling you, or they were an old homestead site or what. And I was like, have I gone back to 92? It's crazy. If I look in Back to the Future or something like that. But so that's one of the things I've been thinking about. And then I'm going to name redacted on this one, but I've seen this happen now, like one a month, which to me is like, I'm seeing a trend here, and it's not a good trend. And what it is it says, hello, always wanted to start a podcast, so I bought my equipment, and this person had a picture, and there was a desk with 2 boom arms, 2 microphones, and a mixer, and bought my equipment, and it's set up already and ready to go. Now the hard part. Want to guess what he asked, Jim?
Go. What did he ask?
What should I talk about? How did y'all get inspired, or any ideas of what to make your shows about?
I saw this.
Format, any advice is greatly appreciated. And I was like, oh, holy schmoly. And that's, on one hand, I'm like, kudos, because there are a lot of people that are the opposite. I know what I want to talk about, but they get stuck on buying the equipment. This person flip-flopped. So I kind of said, hey, I have things that will help you with that, but basically, what would you talk about, even if nobody was listening and you didn't get paid to talk about it? Because when you first start out, that's kind of where you're at. And there are things that you can do. You can ask your friends, what do you think are my strengths? And, obviously things like that. But I just saw that and I was like, that's like another one I've seen. And they're starting to pop more and more, which is, I get it that you're really, really excited because they've read whatever 4 or 5 things like podcasting is the now thing. And they jump in and then they go buy the software and it's like, ooh, it's a little, because I mean, on one hand, he's got 2 microphones. He might end up doing a solo show.
Right. It's a good looking setup. I remember seeing that. I was like, wow, that's a pretty cool. It's a pretty cool setup. Seriously, how do you get that far and not have it, have an idea what you're going to do? But, I guess, people get there with it. I just can't imagine it going that direction unless you're kind of a hardware nerd and you just like the concept of the hardware. Dave, I think we underestimate the difficulty of that very first podcast for most people. You're nervous, you're throwing yourself out there. It's like, am I going to get rejected? Are people going to laugh at me? Who's going to listen? I mean, just all those very things. So it is, getting for those of us who are into their 10th or 50th or 500th show, I think we take for granted the work that it takes and all the stuff that we did. But getting over the hump of that very first podcast is hard. Yeah. I mean, for a lot of people, it's just really difficult. So I don't, we say just do it, but I think sometimes that's a little harder.
I think it was easier for us because nobody was listening back then.
Yeah. Well, and I came off, we were talking about TV show spinoffs. My Home Gadget Geeks is a spinoff of the Home Server Show. And I spun off another show and I dragged 300 along with me. Hey, you want to listen to another tech show? Come on over here. So, I was a spinoff, and I think that's a lot easier if you're podcasting with someone else and then you just spin it off. If I were going to spin off some kind of podcast show off of this one, and God, I never would. Trust me, I did enough. I talk enough about podcasting here, but, we'd have a built-in audience. And if I could always say, hey, we're starting a new show on Tuesday nights, whatever, or we're going to talk podcasting. And I won't do that, by the way, but it would be easier that way to spin it off. So that's another, and I actually encourage new podcasters to get involved with somebody else on a podcast, somebody who's maybe been doing it for a while and then spin themselves off. Yeah.
Well, it worked for Serial and S-Town, you're right.
Yeah.
Big, huge audiences from This American Life.
Listen, NPR kills it in this area because they are just one big, gigantic promotion machine. That's NPR. They promote themselves now on other podcasts more than they podcast. I mean, I'm a big Radiolab fan, and I bet 3 out of every 4th show is a promotion for a new show.
Yeah.
It's just, I've kind of gotten like, are you guys doing anything at Radiolab? Like, are we getting anything original? The other day, they played a show that they played 2 years ago. And I was like, guys, you're only getting one a month.
Well, the other thing I thought was interesting is they had this thing where if you donate X amount of money, this other company will like match it or double it. And then they came back and said, hey, you did great. Thanks so much. They said if we do it again, and I'm like, okay, so you have a ton of cash.
I know.
Mountains of cash. And I'm not getting any content. I'm like, what's the deal over there? Because I'm with you. I like Radiolab.
Their stories are harder to create. They do some great journalism. I mean, the stuff that they cover is big and expensive, and they fly people all over the country to get good audio and some of those kinds of things. And yeah, it's expensive. It's just that I've seen a trend over the last year where every 3 out of every 4 episodes is a advertisement for a new podcast.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Robert Krulwich. We're bringing in, Mary Jane from the new and, from our new podcast. And then they just take over. And you're like, man, I wish I had that gig where I could just do, 10 seconds.
Introduce new shows.
Yikes.
Yeah.
So anyways, I shouldn't rant on that, but I don't know.
I'm with you though. I sent a thing into, Startup. Said, hey, call this number and leave us feedback. And I said, hey, Alex, your first season of Startup I loved. I said, I learned about you and I learned about your company and I got attached to hearing about you. I said, your second season was about some t-shirt guy and I really didn't care about him. I didn't really care about the story. And I said, and now you're giving me new stories that are like maybe 1 or 2 episodes long. I go, that's This American Life. It's a new story every week, well produced. And I go, it's great content. I go, in the meantime, I'm like, what's going on with Gimlet? You know, all this stuff is going on. You're adding shows, you're canceling shows. I would love to know the behind the scenes and stuff of your show. That's what Startup was about, starting up your company. I said, so take it for what it's worth. I'm still listening, but I said, I'm heading towards the unsubscribe button because I want to know what's happening with you. So, you know, when you change your podcast, you know, things are going to happen. Jim, I know you were talking about some things changing on your end.
Yeah, well, you know, here's a question I have for you, Dave, and for the audience out there that's listening live. You know, when you make a change in your podcast, recently this week, at Gallup, we made a big change. It's a pricing change. And anytime you change prices on anything, you know, your customers get a little agitated. So I've been dealing with that since I'm the face of Gallup from that standpoint. I've been dealing with kind of some of that negative blowback. But when you change and you're letting your audience know you're changing, do you err on the side of over communication, or you just rip the Band-Aid off and get it done? You know, because one of the things, and I hear this from people all the time, it's like, you know, make sure your audience knows where you're going and the things that you're doing and be very clear about it. But one of my experiences has always been, no matter how clear you are, people always argue with you. Always. Doesn't matter what you do. They just will continue to argue. And so you can continue, you know, you can have these back and forth conversations. And if they disagree with you, they'll just continue to argue with you. So is it worth it to have that argument? Or do you just rip the Band-Aid off and say, guys, we're making this change, you know, and move on? Because your listeners will eventually, the negative blowback will eventually settle down. So Dave, advice from you when you think about when you're making changes in your podcast, and let's say they're fairly significant changes in what you're doing, how much time do you spend, or should you spend, working with your audience and explaining it? And then let me give one more example. So Microsoft a couple of years ago was really bad at this. They would make changes and then they would produce 2,000 word blog posts and sometimes more, that would over explain it. And then their audience would just parse those blog posts. And that would create more conversation than just, guys, here's what we're doing. Here's what you need to do. So your thoughts, Dave? You do long explanations, just rip the Band-Aid off?
I don't know if I would do a long explanation. I might do a long explanation to somebody who then contacted me and complained.
I like that.
I think that. There's a book, oh man. I wish I could remember it. I grew up reading this book. This guy the CEO of my first company I worked for, it was like the 5th discipline. And one of the disciplines was share the vision. If your employees don't understand the vision of the company, they should understand that how they impact the vision and blah, blah, blah. So I think if you share the vision of, hey, we're doing this because this is where we're going, then in theory, the people that want to go that way will go, oh, okay, I get it. Now, if somebody wanted to go someplace else, then they're not going to be happy. And they go, wait, I'm going over there. And you're like, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. I know that's where you want to go. We're not going there anymore, though. We're going over here. And that's where you kind of got to go. So if you're not going where I'm going, I really appreciate your support. See you later. And that's the tough one, you know, but
I think the hard part, especially if you're going to make a significant change, we had Jeff on last week, and he's made some significant changes in his podcasts, you know, over time. If you're going to make significant change, you have a large audience. I think you got to bring them to it in kind of chunks. You know, I think it's not either or, it's both and. You need to be clear and concise and quick in your communication. So little bits of information about where you're going and what you're doing, if far enough in advance that they begin to catch that vision, but not all at once. Not kind of a 8-page letter to your customer that says, hey, here's everything that we're doing. Same in the podcasting world, like, you know, not necessarily dumping all the changes all at once, but kind of bring them into it and some strategic, you know, thought process around, okay, maybe I'm going to deliver this message in 5 different chunks that are all going to make sense and be organized as we go along, and then make that change. Give them the opportunity to kind of react and respond to and get some feedback from it. That's not always possible in business and in podcasting. It's not always possible. You know, if you've got a brand new idea, you don't want somebody to steal it. You've got to just do it. You know, you can't forecast it.
Well, in the case of Mixlr, I forget when they said their prices are going up, but they're giving you plenty of time to know. so that if you're like,
Couple
oh,
weeks.
like,
Yeah, a couple weeks.
they're letting you, hey, if somebody else has done that, so hey, we have Kim jumping in. So I think that's part of it. Any kind of change, if you can, like you said, you don't want to go too crazy, but if it's something that you're providing a service, if you can give people a chance to find something else, because if they're not going to go, that would be great. So
Yeah.
Good morning, Kim.
Hey, Kim. Oops,
We can't hear.
Yeah,
you.
your
She's
software
muted.
muted on your software muted in the Hangout.
Let me see if I can unmute
Yeah,
you.
hover up here. It'll. No, you can't. She could just. There we go.
There we go.
Good morning.
There we go.
I have some questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm working with a new client who is one of those people who gets all the equipment and gets all the stuff. And then she says, oh, content. Yeah. But she does have a plan, which is better than the guy with 2 mics and a mixer. First of all, she's interested in some free hosting sites.
Ugh.
So
Okay.
Podbean, yeah, I know. SoundCloud. She's only going to be doing this for a year, and after that year, this site disappears. It's an election site. She's running for an office in an organization.
So
she's
if
not
I'm
looking long term,
I would say, so your candidate is fine building your house on sand. They could go away and, to me, it's like,
see, she's in the situation that she has this amount of money. And
well,
so that's why she's interested in finding out about free. Is that
Kim, how
is
much?
free really an option?
How much is she going to podcast? I mean, what hours per? I mean, what's her forecast?
She does not know, but probably starting out with 5 2 to 3 minute podcasts, and then maybe twice a month. That I'm guessing. I don't know that she has a plan.
is she going to have a large back catalog?
No.
And she just doesn't. She really doesn't care about it. Once the campaign's over, it's
That's
over.
right.
Right.
That's
It,
right.
it can
She's-
be taken down.
She wants to make 2 minute audio clips on her stand on various topics, and then podcast / blog once or twice a month.
And
Yeah.
she cares about the RSS feed, or is she just looking
She
for a
doesn't
player?
know what an RSS feed is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is
That's
she going to
my
try
job.
Is she going to drive people? Well, are you going to drive people to a site? Are you going to have people try to subscribe to this thing? Are you going to, are you going to use a player on Facebook? What's your thought about delivery?
There is no plan.
Okay.
So
What do you
we
think
are
you should
starting
do?
from the screen. I wanted to do audio because I don't know how to do video.
Well, video is not that much different than audio, to be honest with you. There's some easy ways around that, but audio is certainly easier. It's one dimensional. You don't have to worry about the complexity of editing from that standpoint.
Also, then we don't have to buy equipment. I think all she's got right now is a laptop with a microphone. So telling her that she might have to buy lights and she might have to buy a backdrop, she would probably not be happy with that and say audio only is fine with her.
Yeah. Have you thought about just putting them on YouTube?
It is an option. It is an option.
Yeah. Also, can you bring your microphone down by your mouth? I think you're
I
using. your
know. I
headset.
think we're using our camera mic.
No, it's her headset.
It's our headset mic that we're using. Yeah.
All right, then I'll bring that
There
down.
we
much
go.
better.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah.
And I'll move this.
Yeah.
I have 2 bottom of the barrel. My official bottom of the barrel, and they're not horrible, but they're cheaper, is Podbean. If you have to go free, Awesound, but their stats are crap and their player is slow to load.
Well, hey, podcast.com is still free. So if you go to podcast with an S, they're still free. And they've been around 2 years now. And I think they just got purchased by somebody else. They're not showing any signs of going anywhere.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
That's a service that I've been posting to. I don't get a ton of traffic out there, but that's a pretty easy to use and easy to manage site. I would put it in the risk category of SoundCloud, because we don't know, they could shut that thing down at any time.
Okay.
But podcast.com.
I think Awesound will do your first 20 hours for free. Pinecast will do free. Your website is very, your stats are bleh, but they're free, but they only keep the last 10 episodes in your feed. Now, I don't know if they're on your website, but their only last 10 episodes are in your feed. And then it's $5 a month if you want to go up. for one podcast, and then they have this like they have 5 or 50. So you're either paying almost nothing or bleeding. And there's one of those that's like they work. It's not. I've been using them for the podcast rodeo show, and it's like this is definitely not my first choice.
Well, if I were going to be paying $5 a month, why wouldn't I just pay a couple bucks more and go to Libsyn?
Totally.
Right. Or I'd go to Podbean. I would go down. I think they have doesn't Podbean have like a $3 a month plan or something ridiculous?
Somebody just told me they're free, and I found that hard to believe because I'd never heard anybody say they were free before.
They used to have a free plan, but
Okay.
it was everybody has a free. I mean, Spreaker has a free plan, but I think you get 45 minutes a month or something like that. It's really most people that have a free plan. It's there for you to log in, look at the back end, upload an episode, and then you're out of space.
Right.
Because if you make it to where you can use it, then you end up like Mixler years later going, hey, guess what? We're canceling the free plan.
Yeah. And since we have a 1-year limit on this, I'm not sure that that's a big issue for her.
Right.
Because we can certainly 2-minute videos or 2-minute audio can just be kept on a key drive somewhere, and we can pull those
Right.
back up as needed.
Do you think,
Okay.
Kim, that she'll ever use more than 3 hours of audio in a year?
I don't know. She really doesn't know what she wants to do. Putting out the planks of her platform on a podcast is really radical for this organization,
Mhm.
and so she's breaking new ground. And
Then I would back up then, because you're trying to give her a solution and you don't know where you're going yet. And I know she
Well,
doesn't know where she's going, but
she doesn't know where she's going either. So we're trying to figure out what her options are, and part of that cost analysis is a cost analysis of how do we figure out how much this is going to cost for what she thinks she might want to do. And we don't want to pay more. We don't want to pay for more hosting than she's going to need.
Yeah.
But if we could get something that would be nearly free or free enough, that's a good plan for her.
Yeah. I like, and I know Dave's going to hate me for this one, but I like SoundCloud for this reason only. Like disposable.
He just threw up in his mouth.
I know he did. You get 3 hours. They're disposable. You don't know where you're going with it. It does have pretty good visibility, and it has a pretty easy embeddable player. I mean, they have made a lot of things pretty easy. I'm not a big fan of them for the long term. I'm not saying podcasters should go there and that should be their
Right.
primary site.
Okay.
I'm not saying all those things, but especially when she doesn't know what she's doing, a SoundCloud relationship is super easy. Get in there, sign up.
Okay.
They have a fairly flat free plan. Give it a try. I mean, make a dozen of these things. If they're 2 or 3 minutes, make them,
Yeah.
try them, float them. You don't have to stay there, right? If you're going to go,
Right.
if you find she's going to do something different, then move at that point, right? It's not that hard to move from there. But SoundCloud does give you a good opportunity. Just get some stuff out there and try some stuff out and some visibility with very little relationship ties.
And Daniel J. Lewis had a screenshot this month of how multiple people on Reddit were saying that iTunes wasn't updating from SoundCloud. So who doesn't want that kind of service?
Well, again, I'm not saying you move your service there, Dave. It's just even for podcasters that are trying stuff out, I just love that SoundCloud platform for the feedback and some of those. It's just easy to use that way. Again, I don't recommend people stay there, but from a disposable audio standpoint, it's perfect for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Now here's question number 2.
Okay.
Somewhere recently I saw, and I think maybe Jim posted this, if you want to really get up on iTunes, you make sure you put Chinese on your image. Not from you, Jim? Maybe
not
from
for me,
somebody
but it
else.
sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. So where can I get that done?
Why would you do that?
Because she is also trying to collect, this is an international organization, so she wants to reach out to people who are in China.
Oh,
And so
And
she wants
India.
a Chinese image in her artwork?
Yes.
Fiverr, I guess.
Fiverr?
Yeah, I'd go or some sort of Chinese Facebook group or somebody, because you don't want to like have this cool symbol, then you find out that it actually says, rotten grapefruit in Chinese, but it looks cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I need somebody trustworthy. Fiverr, I'm questioning their
Yeah, that's true.
trustworthiness.
yeah, no.
I would need to have somebody else who could look at it and say, yeah, that says what you say it says.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I do not have a resource for that.
Okay. I don't either. You know, I'm also looking at multilingual website, and that's a whole new can of cats I've never even thought about opening.
Yeah. It gets uber complicated when you start adding in new languages. And
Yes.
we face this at Gallup all the time, and we spend a lot of money in translations, and not just translations, but validations of translations. And then even when we do that, we get feedback that it's not right. And so
Yeah.
this area is super, super hard, and it's super expensive. So just know there aren't a lot of services, so to speak, that aren't going to be expensive for the most part when you move forward with it. It's a complex issue.
It is. And I found something called WPML, which is WordPress multi-language, I assume. And apparently they do some translations for you. Others, if you want a large amount of translation, you have to pay a fee, but they will at least translate part of your site. And that's another option for her. I'm trying to figure out, what do I put on the plate that I serve her? Because if I overwhelm her, we don't get anywhere, and she has a deadline she needs to get this up by.
Yeah, that's the other thing is, if she's not willing to pay for hosting, how is she going to pay for a multilingual website?
Well, no, she's got a certain amount of money. She's just got to figure out how to allocate it, and it may be better to allocate it to the multilingual than it is to a podcast host.
Okay. Yeah,
it's just a challenge. We're trying to figure this out.
Do you have access to guests in language? In other words, if she's doing a podcast, can she create audio in a different language? Does she have access to people in an organization that speak that language?
She
Chinese?
might. She might. I don't know. She's got a former student who's said that the former student said she would do the translations.
Yeah. Here's what we're finding, or here's what I'm finding with translations, that when you put the written word into translations, people pick it apart in the other language. So when I'm going from English to Spanish, and I get that Spanish translation, no matter how many times we've had it checked, somebody comes up and says, "Oh no, this part's wrong, and this, you didn't do this, you didn't use this right word here, and this doesn't mean that." No matter what we do, when we speak it, there's way more forgiveness in the language when someone's actually speaking it. And so we've started doing a lot more audio content in language, even when it's not their first language, than written stuff. And so she may want to spend more time, instead of trying to get documents translated, if she can get a speaker, a native speaker, or even a second language speaker to do the audio version of it, she may have better success.
Jason says he used WPML or one of its plugins, and it gave visitors a drop down of what language they read it in. But yeah, you are going to end up sounding like Yoda. I get people at Libsyn that you can tell that English is not their first language, and then you go over to troubleshoot their feed and everything's in German. You're like, that's why they were talking of speech that when could not find answer kind of thing. You're like, that explains it.
Yes.
So,
well, I like the idea of doing the audio with my candidate being in English and the respondent being in Chinese, because that would make it really simple and very interesting for people who are not native English speakers, but they're Chinese.
Easier to transcribe too, right? So you can get a transcription.
Right.
Google will do an automatic transcription for you, and then you can have somebody clean up that transcription rather than starting from scratch. So it'll be a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper that way.
It might be better to just ask the person to transcribe it herself.
Sure. Totally.
And that way I don't have to pay anybody else, because that person's already doing this gratis.
Yeah. Right on.
Transcriptions, I've discovered that how we speak and how we write are very different.
Totally.
And so the first time I transcribed an interview, I said, this is the end of transcriptions on my website, because this person reads like an idiot, but came across very professionally, very interesting in the interview. And I said, I can't do this to her. So
when I found out, because I was paying, I think, $1 a minute for a transcription. And by the time I then got that transcription and beat it into shape for something you could read, I was like, I can just type this for the amount of time I spent beating up a transcription into something, because we don't talk like we write. We don't write like we talk. And
I'm not a big fan of transcriptions anyway.
No, that will make me click away from your website. Like,
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
naked poo on fire.
Some people require them. Just know that some people require them, and I don't know in the political circles or whatever. If you do get into that, at least you have the option there. So, but the audio, the spoken word is just more forgiven than the written word is, and may go faster that way for you too.
So.
That's a great idea, and if we could have somebody do the translation audio instead of putting it down into Chinese characters, then they may figure out how to upload it to a Roman language format on my WordPress. That solves a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Thanks. This has been really helpful.
Good. All right. Thanks for jumping in.
Guys.
No, good to see you.
Yeah.
Nice seeing you too.
The other thing I would warn you about in my travels, like if somebody came to me and said, I want a podcast for free, I would say, I'm not your guy, because I have found the less money they want to spend, the more they want to complain. So you could be walking into a giant headache.
I didn't say I wasn't charging.
Right. Well, I'm just saying,
I like that. Yes. Yeah.
She's paying me. It's just how much is she going to be paying me versus how much is she paying Libsyn or Blueberry or SoundCloud or whoever.
Well, the fun part is then you give her tools that are meh, and when she gets results, it's like, hey, I can't tell where people are coming from. I don't know what tools you're using. I told you this. Yeah. So have fun. We'll see. Hopefully I'm wrong.
No, I suspect you'll be right, but she's a nice person, and I don't think we'll have a lot of arguments. And I don't think statistics are even on her radar. So if I don't tell her about them, she won't know.
There you go.
It's good. It's good. Well, help. It sounds like she needs all the help, Kim, that you can give her. So
yes,
it is an interesting problem to say the least.
Yeah.
And I think, go forward and try some things out. You may be on the edge of something new.
I am. That's why being on the bleeding edge means you get cut and you bleed a lot.
You do.
You do.
Carry lots of Band-Aids.
Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you. Well, of course, the happy music means it's time to thank it's the first of the month. So I'm going to take a deep breath and try to thank all of our lovely patrons. That would include Josh Rivers from CreativeStudio.Academy, Glenn the Geek from Horse Radio Network, Nick Suberling, Alan Meisner, Barry Kessler, Frank Brill, Dale Henninger, the one and only Jim Collison, Corner Talk, Darren Dake, Joe Taylor, Josh Liston, Mark King, Creepy Kingdom, Cauldron's Crypt, Kale Nelson from Ham Radio 360, Wahoo Idea Network, Kim Slusher, Jeremy Dennis, Rob Griffith, Corey from IVNV, Garrett Godfrey, Slept in the Government Class Podcast, Mike Moody, Barb, Jay Cleveland Payne. Mike Moody, you are in here twice, my friend. I appreciate that. Alan Palmer, Emily Prokop from the Story Behind Podcast, Gary and Margaret from Kiwi Mana, Jason Bryant from Matt Talk Online, David Wilson, the Seahawkers Podcast, Craig from Ingleus Podcast, and of course, Cody Saison. And if you'd like to be one of our awesome supporters, we do thank everybody at the beginning of the month. And for a certain amount, you're actually listed on the website, plus a whole bunch of back catalog and things like that. I'm going to be uploading a new video today that nobody's going to buy, but it's interesting to see. This thing about how you can find influencers online. It's $300 a month. But I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm never going to buy it. But I was like, you guys might want to see that. So thanks to all our fun-filled, awesome supporters. Go to askthepodcastcoach.com/awesome.
Cool. I appreciate those supporters. So it all goes to Dave.
Hey, speaking of Patreon, how are we doing on time? Good. I had 3 people sign up for the Patreon, $1 a month. I will take that. And you ready for the giant commercial that I did to get them to sign up? Here it is. Now there's a little bit of Steve Stewart in this. So, but this is what they heard to get them to sign up.
But I do believe a majority of your listeners are not newbie podcasters.
And that's why they should sign up for my Patreon account. Wait, did I say that out loud? That was it. That was the awesome promotion I did to get people to sign up at the Patreon account. And I put the one for Ask the Podcast Coach, not the one for the School of Podcasting, because that one's almost dead. And my point here is people can't sign up. People cannot buy. People cannot hire what they don't know about. And so here, apparently I had people in my audience that would be happy to throw me $1 a month. They just didn't know it was an option. They thought I had the School of Podcasting, I had consulting, and I don't know, that's it. So I just went, oh, they should join my Patreon. I got put a link in the show notes, and next thing I know, I had 3 people sign up. So one of them was Mike Moody, who's already a supporter. So Mike is doubly thanked. So it's one of those things, if you don't mention it, nobody's going to sign up. I thought that was rather interesting that I just did that I was just being a joke, nothing too crazy. And next thing I know, 3 people signed up, and I was like, So
yeah, you gotta let people know you have it. Nobody will magically find it. Don't make it obnoxious though, right? Just say you've got it. It's a great way to support the show, and I love it. I try to support as many as I can through it when they're using it, and I know they're using it. And we've on Home Gadget Geeks, we've seen a little increase in it as well. So it's been a great way to kind of promote that. And folks, surprisingly, Dave, people actually do want to give and support things that they really value. And so if you make that reasonable, they'll participate.
And then the other question I wanted to hit, this came from Darwin Dave. He simply asked the question, what are you passionate about? And I was like, that's a good question. Jim, you want to go first? You want me to go first?
No, you can go first.
I think for me, he said, picking up his pen. The thing that always kind of makes me just jump into action is helping people. I don't know how that got burned into my DNA, but that's why I was a teacher. I remember the first time I went in and taught people how to run their office equipment, and I felt like a superhero. My favorite is I would go in, somebody would buy a new piece of equipment, and I would show how to make double-sided copies. This is back in the day. And they're like, oh, this is awesome. And I'm like, oh, if you put your things in this way, it'll actually turn it into a book. And they're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And the whole time I'm thinking, this was on your old equipment. This is not a new feature. You just didn't know it was there. And so I help people get the most out of their equipment. And I was like, well, this is really cool. And I was like everybody's buddy. And that somehow planted a seed that I like, wow, I really like helping people. So that's one of my passions, I think. Jim?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just amplifying somebody's message. So, in this case, Dave, you want to help podcasters, and I do too. I mean, I really enjoy having these conversations and helping people get the best of stuff. I realize not every answer is cut and dry, and this is hard and the stuff that we do, but no, I like making other people big deals. So for me, it's a big deal when I'm helping somebody become a big deal. I myself don't need to do that. It's not, it feels good when people recognize you and say nice things. All that stuff is good, right? We're built that way as humans, but I really enjoy making other people big deals. So that's fun for me. Podcasting is a great way to do it. I've gotten to do it at work in a couple ways. And look what we've done out here. We're 100 and whatever shows into this thing, and we get 25 to 30 to show up on a Saturday morning at 9:30, right? Type deal. And it's fun to do. And we always just appreciate the audience that's out there and the interaction that they have with us. Dave, you're a part of people's life every single week. And I think that's a big deal. So it's fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, I think, I'm pretty passionate about music. And I think that's one of the things why I like podcasting is you can end up painting with audio as opposed to, because my brother, I'm a big stick figure theater kind of guy. I am not the artist in the family. That all went to my brother. But to me, I love the fact that with sound and sound effects and your voice and all sorts of other fun things, you can actually kind of paint with audio.
Oh, totally.
Yeah. And I just released the latest edition of The Messengers, and that's a tough podcast to create because 9 times out of 10, I'm listening with my ears, but I'm also listening with my heart. Mm-hmm. And the editor of the podcast of the movie sent me a rather lengthy voicemail, for lack of a better phrase, of him talking about his father-in-law who died literally the day before the movie premiered. And he was like the movie's biggest cheerleader. And so, as you might imagine, he's sobbing through most of it. And I was like, it was so intimate. Like he just walked in and just dropped trowel. Like, no. And I was like, so I'm like, okay, how do I take this now? I could put it out, but it's going to bum everyone out. It really just is. So I found ways to mix in his story. He told a story. So I found pieces where other people were telling the story. And then this, and then it was just weird, but the whole thing was shaping a story. And at the end of it, it was like, okay, it's still really sad and touching, but it was doable. But it was a matter of like, okay, how do I paint this to where it's going to make people hopefully feel okay at the end? And it was tough. I was sitting there crying, listening to the thing, and I heard it like 4 million times by the time I let go of it. So, anyway, Emily says, I don't remember hearing that song.
No, they're talking about Emily. You know, she's been covering We Didn't Start the Fire, the Billy Joel song. And so Kim had been saying she'd been listening to that and wasn't very familiar with that song. I've been surprised. I've been listening to that too, Emily, and I've been surprised at how many references he jams into that song.
Yeah.
You know, when she first started talking about doing that, I'm like, okay, I'm going to cover 1950 to 1951. And I'm like, seriously, there's enough for a podcast in those 2 years in that song? And yet there's just a bunch of references. And so that's, for me too, that's been a great history lesson to kind of hear. She's going through chronologically the years, and I think she does about 2 years at a time in about 15 minutes. It's been awesome. I love that kind of stuff.
That was me. And I have to go back and listen to the song, because I'm like, wait, did he really mention whatever Pee Wee Herman or whatever the mention Coke and Pepsi? Because then in my head I'm sitting there singing Wade. I'm like, wait, he did mention that. Eisenhower's in there. Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I like, and there's some references where Emily's not exactly sure what he's referencing, because there could be several. Like,
right.
So we think it's this one. And no, I just didn't realize he jammed that many words. I mean, I knew he was jamming words in, and he said before he hates that song from a music standpoint because it's not musically very good.
No.
So it's
there's no melody to it, and the fact that he then has to remember all those words. He said he always turns around. I think his drummer said if he gets stuck, he'll look at his drummer because his drummer remembers the lyrics.
Well, it's like that Johnny Cash who sang that I've been.
Oh yeah, I've been everywhere,
and you got to know all the cities type thing. Yeah,
That's
it's a ton of fun. I think Emily's on to something there and has been on to something for a while that I just really appreciate, that kind of well thought out, well put together, and it's very niche-y from that standpoint. That kind of stuff, I really, that is, I think, the essence of finding your niche. And I would never want to do a podcast like that myself. I could not have the discipline or the time that it takes to do the research that she does, but Emily is uniquely built to do that kind of stuff, and it's great.
Talking about what's your passion, right? Her passion is journalism,
right,
and research. So that's right up her alley, So
she does a great job on that, and I'd love to hear more of that. There's another one, Cody Wheaton, who I think he came in one time and asked a question way back. He does Shots of History.
Okay.
It's a podcast about alcohol. Do you remember that? This would have been maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Vaguely, yeah.
He came on, so he does the Shots of History, and it's all history of alcohol. And again, little 8-minute vignettes on these different. I think he just covered the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah.
And in a 3-part series, and it's really digestible from an audio standpoint. I can play it if I run it, like I'll be at work and one of my long podcasts will end on halfway. So I'll go pull Emily or pull his. It's nice to have those to kind of finish up, the commute.
That's, and of course, the founder of AA right here in Akron, Ohio. There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, anything fun coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, we actually just talked a bunch. Super nerdy, by the way. If you are interested in Bitcoin or the blockchain, I just had an expert in on that, talking about those two topics and what that means. If you had invested in Bitcoin just 4 years ago, your money would have been 100 times more valuable today than it was then. So pretty interesting stuff. TheAverageGuy.tv. That
is something I've heard about it, and it always kind of was like, it's a fad kind of thing. I never got it.
Not a fad. No. In fact, there's Bitcoin ATM machines now out that you can put money in and take money out based on Bitcoin. So pretty interesting. Yeah. So pretty interesting stuff. The latest show, I just released it, theaverageguy.tv.
All right. You can find me at schoolofpodcasting.com. Use the coupon code LISTENER to save when you sign up. We're here every Saturday. AskThePodcastCoach.com/live. Thanks to the chat room. Stick around for some post show coming right up.